As our connectivity grows and deepens, we also see that our strength is based in the diversity of our differences, whether geographic, cultural, lived experiences, organizations, partnership size, and others. It is reflected in the network's values that continue to guide us through the complexity of our work. Humility, empathy, and reverence set the tone for how we approach our work. Inclusion, trust, and reciprocity are the essential ingredients we strive to embody as we undertake it. Similarly, it is reflected in the outcomes of the network's white papers, including capacity building for collaboration, stewarding California's biodiversity, shifting the regulatory paradigm towards bold immediate action for a resilient California landscape, and others. These papers have helped advance our work, broaden continued thinking, inspire new approaches, and even catalyze initiatives with state leaders such as Cutting Green Tape. And most recently, with the development of the network's 5-year strategic roadmap, we have harnessed the learnings of our past 5 years to expand our commitment to supporting youth, our place-based networks and affiliates. We hope to do this through 4 key focal areas, which Darcy will describe later today: strengthening our peer exchange and capacity building work, increasing our work to create system solutions to complex challenges, fostering support and participation in larger landscape stewardship movements, and remaining nimble and adaptable to new opportunities as we grow our network's infrastructure. I don't know about you, but so much has happened in the past 5 years. Global pandemics, right? Anti-racism uprisings, changed administrations, and the largest, most intense wildfires in California's history. The fact that we are meeting virtually instead of gathering in person just punctuates this. Our work is already challenging, and with all this change, it certainly does not feel like it's getting any easier. But that's where our networks come in, to meet these ecological and social challenges in a more integrated way. And while the past 5 years have been our living history, the next 5 years will be our opportunity to truly define our future, define the promise of 21st century conservation, and how we reach our potential as a part of a larger national and international movement around this work. In a recent opinion piece, 21st Century Conservation, a Vision for Collaboration Across Landscape, several former Department of Interior leaders reflected that we are at an important juncture in the arc of conservation. We have inspiring conservation successes, but there is much more to do to sustain biodiversity, create a more just and inclusive conservation movement, address the challenges of climate change, conserve parks and working open spaces, and sustain our vibrant rural and urban communities. Their sentiments and others are acknowledging that our growing movement intersects with other social change movements related to social justice, public health, urban regeneration, and many others, all essential components to truly fostering stewardship at scale. Change is happening fast, requiring us to reflect, adapt, and act more quickly than before. For the network, much of our work is centered around facilitating change, culture change, systems change, organizational change, environmental change, and more. Today, we have administrations at both the federal and state level that are receptive and, in many cases, inspired to advance landscape scale conservation and stewardship work as essential to reducing biodiversity loss and impacts from climate change. As shared by Senator McGuire, there's a climate bond potentially in front of us that we can support and make true change around. And as we will hear from Deputy Assistant Secretary Sharon, these administrations are showing support for bold, innovative action in our field. Our opportunity is to help inform and shape this work. We're also seeing important enabling conditions, a strong commitment to science, an opening to craft new policies, increased opportunities to bring climate adaptation and mitigation work, growing awareness that regional networks can play an integrator role to meet state and local goals, and racial reckoning that is opening up doors and minds to conversations around equity, inclusivity, and diversity in our thinking around landscape stewardship. Coupling this new hope with the urgent need for action, it is clear we have an inflection point in front of us. We are living history, and more importantly, we can shape history. The receptivity of these administrations and the broadening of voices in this work brings forward potential support, resources, and a focus to translate challenges into solutions at multiple scales. I imagine that each of us in this room feel the urgency and imperative to act. As former National Park Service Director John Jarvis recently said, it's no longer, are we going to do something? It's, are we going to do enough? While recognizing this inflection point, the spirit of the Stewardship Forum is to celebrate our shared history, to chart the opportunities before us, to reflect and learn from each other, to galvanize nascent ideas, to forge new connections and friendships, have fun, and commit to shared priorities. Our time together during the next 5 weeks will inform our work ahead and contribute to the development of a larger fall Stewardship Forum, which will be held in the first week of November. I am always reminded that landscape scale stewardship is still a young and emerging field. Many now recognize its potential, but it takes gatherings like this to access the wisdom to see how we can continue shifting the conservation paradigm toward cross-boundary collaborative approaches that connect efforts and scale them. Coupling this with the network's continued goals to shift assumed paradigms in conservation and stewardship, I asked myself, how might the network recognize and honor our Indigenous partners, friends, and colleagues who are attending this forum? We are all seeing the practice of land acknowledgement happen in our meetings, convenings, and events, and we know this practice can be a powerful one to recognize history, community, and true partnership with Indigenous people. So as the network's relationships with California's tribes grows, and our connections to the tribes whose ancestral territories we work strengthens, we want to take a moment to recognize the centrality of Indigenous perspectives and cultures in all considerations related to lands and land stewardship. We have much to learn. The Network Steering Committee is committed to authentic and meaningful action to build solidarity in our conservation and stewardship movement. And so we invite all of you to reflect on 3 questions that will hopefully help us learn together about how we can stand in true allyship with California's tribes. First, what is the history of the land you directly or indirectly work on or have access to? Second, who are the native people or communities where you live, or who are connected to the land you are working on? Third, what is one step you can take today to support Native and all people who wish to support Indigenous priorities and practices in stewardship? As we consider these questions throughout the next 5 weeks together, offered in acknowledgement of our Indigenous communities and the real-time learnings of our growing network, I feel it important also to acknowledge that our network has struggled with its work at the intersection of immigration reform, Black Lives Matter, and other social movements. We must reckon with historical systems that continue to harm, from racism to economic hardship and other forms of inequality. Understanding this, we see an opportunity in asking, what is the role of collaborative landscape scale stewardship and networks in supporting outcomes that are just, equitable, and durable for the diversity of Californians? How can we use this inflection point to reconsider and center the intersection of conservation and stewardship with the imperative of racial justice, inclusivity, and intersectional environmentalism? Knowing there is so much that can be explored in this area, we have commissioned a Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Roundtable in 2020 to help us authentically address these questions and more. With that, I'd like to invite one of the Diversity, Equity, Inclusion Roundtable's co-chairs, Shelana deSilva, who has been with the network for the past 4 years and has championed the need for the network to explore and embrace this role in equity work. Shelana is a writer, organizer, and policy expert who is dedicated to creating a just and resilient society. We are extremely grateful for the gift of her leadership.
Thank you so much, Sharon. And thank you, Senator McGuire, for your leadership and commitment as well. Hi, everyone. It's wonderful to be with you today. As Sharon noted, it is my honor to serve as co-lead for the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Roundtable alongside my friend and colleague, Jose Gonzalez. Our DEI Roundtable is a group of women and men from a variety of racial backgrounds, organizational and movement roles, and geographic locations. They're all active thought leaders in the work to build a more justice-focused conservation movement. Today, it's my privilege to invite all of you on behalf of our roundtable to center the principles of real inclusivity and justice in our ongoing conversations throughout the Spring Forum. You received the individual inquiry guide in your Spring Forum packet, and this is just one tool that you can use to take us up on this invitation to center justice and inclusivity as you participate in these convenings. As Sharon noted, we all have much to learn when it comes to building a truly just conservation and stewardship movement. I hope that the network's vulnerability and honesty in framing an Indigenous land acknowledgement in the form of questions around solidarity can serve as a model for all of us. We can and must move beyond performative gestures, be real about where we are in our capacities and commitments to solidarity and anti-oppression, and keep moving towards each other and growing. So how do we keep moving towards each other and growing? The leaders of our roundtable established early goals for this spring forum to bring history, place, and community into this work as an invitation to build this new justice-focused stewardship movement we're talking about. Given their identities and roles, they have much to offer in designing a pathway for all of us to meaningfully do that, bring history, place, and community into this work. You'll learn about all of this as the spring forum unfolds. You're at this table with me today, so we already have what we need to start down this pathway together. We cannot wait any longer for the perfect individual or organizational conditions, the right training, the right book, the willing Black, Indigenous, or person of color partner. We must start today to transform the work of land protection and stewardship into the very tools that will help dismantle systems of oppression and build the resilient future we all want. Here's the truth. Conservation's roots are entangled in settler colonialism. As we know from US history, often one powerful, wealthy, white individual made decisions about which lands to protect or restore, and these were stolen lands. We must learn about this history, acknowledge it, and choose a new path forward. Today, we are a growing movement of professionals, activists, writers and thinkers, artists, restoration practitioners, and government officials capable of recognizing that the glory of our public lands is rooted in a shameful, oppressive, and violent past. We must recognize this so that we can harness our power to collectively redefine what comes next for public lands and stewardship in general. My ancestors did not have the privilege I have to analyze the problems, research and discuss solutions, or perhaps even consider the effect colonialism had on their health and the health of their lands. That we can see these problems today and consider solutions together is a gift. Our gaze is capable of casting back 400 years and forward into the future of possibilities. What will we do with this gift? Just as environmental justice and climate justice work seeks to shift power away from environmental polluters and exploitative, extractive industries, so must we seek to shift power. How can we shift power to local and Indigenous land stewards? And what individual power are we willing to give up in our daily lives to do that? The author Adrienne Marie Brown teaches about emergent strategy. She shares that meaningful change emerges through hallway conversations, moments of vulnerability with your colleagues, tentative but intentional steps in a new direction. Can you commit to noticing and even fostering emergent strategies? Can you commit, just as a start, to making small-scale changes, valuing critical connections and not just big moves or end goals? Can you recognize and value a real-time process that propagates outward, like mycelium threads underground, growing stronger through multiplicity and connection? And are you willing to do this even when it's not visible for recognition and kudos? In other words, can you appreciate the mycelium threads working hard in the cover of darkness and not just the fruiting body of the mushroom in the sunlight? I can talk about our moral imperatives to do better, and I believe in them, but I wonder if we might also consider how incredible it would feel to look back on our lives, our shared work, and see this moment in time as the point at which we all broke free from our limitations and chose to intentionally build a more just society with every thought, word, and action. Imagine the joy in that. What would happen if we decided to collectively write a new justice-focused chapter for land conservation and stewardship, and we let it be messy and imperfect, but relentless? If not us, who? If not now, when? There's no one else who can shape shift the work of conservation and stewardship so that it is more inclusive and thereby effective. We are all at this table together, so let's get to work.